Hey guys, we're finally back in the hardcore world. As you kind of saw just there, I have been very busy making some modifications to our little shroom, and for this one I definitely have to give credit to Shadowflame, who posted this comment that I'll put on screen right about now. Thank you very much for the comment, my dude. This was a fantastic idea. But yeah, as you can see right here, we've moved our enchanting setup to the little shroom, and I gotta say it looks pretty cool. I'm not entirely sold on the chains just yet. I will probably come up with a different block to replace them. I love how the enchanting table is in a different shape. It's in a less generic shape. We got some shroom lights and bookshelves hanging down for a little bit of complexity in the air here, and of course we're using jungle log to help round out the inside of this mushroom shape and cover up some of the blocks that don't really fit with the color palette. Of course, it's definitely pretty cramped in here, so in order to leave, we're actually leaving through a little hole in the floor here, which is covered up by some trapdoors, and making our way down the stem of this mushroom. As you can see, there's really not much space back there, but it's all good because, well, I mean, it's a really great place for the enchanting table. And in case you were wondering what I was going to be doing with the spot in our basement, now that we've moved our enchanting setup out of the way, as you can see, it's kind of just an empty hole in the ground right now, not much going on down there. We will get to that later in the video. I've got some very, very cool plans for that, but you're gonna have to stick around because I've got some very important matters to discuss first. Oh, excuse me, buddy. And I mean very, very important. So if you remember all the way back in the beginning of this series when I was laying out the concept of the random challenges and whatnot, it seems like forever ago, probably because I don't make these videos very often, but I do remember saying something along the lines of, if the world starts to feel too easy, I'll throw in some new challenges. We'll actually go and roll new challenges just to, you know, spice things up a little bit, make my life just ever so slightly more miserable. And I think it's about time we mix things up a little bit. So if you want to take a minute and follow me over to our hub world, the world between worlds, if you will. If you've been watching since episode 1, this cool little lounge area might look a little bit familiar to you. This is where we rolled our original 2 challenges for our first random hardcore world, in which we died within the first 10 minutes. And then we came back here and rolled our 2 new challenges for the world that we've currently been hanging out in, which if we go ahead and take a look at my inventory, you can see it's these 2 right here, Berserk and Eternal Darkness. And in case you guys don't remember or you happen to miss the very first episode, let me give you a quick recap on how these kinds of things work. In my inventory here are 12 unique challenges. Each one of these limits my gameplay in a certain way and always has to be followed whenever I'm in a hardcore world. Of course, these are the 2 that we already have in our world, so those are not going to be applied here. If you want to know what these individual challenges do, I'll post a link in the description to a Google Doc that I typed out explaining all those different challenge modifiers and exactly what they do to my gameplay. But we're not here just to chit chat about challenges. We are here to pick a new one. So let me just go ahead and load them all up into the dispenser here. And without further ado, it's once again that time, guys. Oh boy. And here we go. Oh boy. Oh no, come on, please. Oh God. If you've checked the Google Doc, you already know what exactly the Penniless modifier does. But in case you haven't, let me give you a quick little rundown. It means that we cannot mine diamonds. Yeah, things are about to get pretty brutal, oh my god. This means we cannot break diamond ore blocks. Not with a pickaxe, not with TNT, not by setting off a creeper nearby, none of that. That is not allowed. Yeah, things are about to get real miserable for me, oh my god. On the plus side, we can still get diamonds from looting. We can get diamond gear by like trading with villagers, which actually brings me to my next point. Speaking of villagers, let's pop back into our hardcore world. So if you've been keeping up with the past few episodes, you would know that I've actually got 2 villagers over in the basement of my shroom over there. And you will also remember that we had a couple, I guess, issues with regards to villagers and villager trading. And if you know anything about Minecraft, you will know, oh hi, that's my face. Okay, I'm sorry about that. You will know that basically every experienced, advanced Minecraft player really depends on villagers for things like mending books and materials and emeralds, but that's the problem. Because it's always nighttime, basically all villager functions are like totally screwed up. I found something that I think could be a good solution. Just hear me out on this. So as you can see right here, I've found this mod called Infinite Villager Trading. It's a fabric mod. This is something that we can go and use in our hardcore world. And the gist of it is just that it removes the max counter from villagers, allowing you to trade with them as often as you want to. As long as I have enough trade goods or emeralds, villagers will want to trade for them. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, Leon, that's just cheating. You can't do infinite villager trading in the vanilla game, so why should you be able to do it here? And well, I've got two very important, I guess you could say counterpoints to that I think if we follow, will make this balanced enough to work in our hardcore world. First of all, not only is villager trading dependent on day-night cycles, but so is villager breeding. And this mod does nothing about villager breeding. So while I would be able to trade with villagers infinitely, I wouldn't be able to breed them, which means that I have a finite amount of villagers to work with. Second of all, I agree. I definitely don't like the idea of abusing infinite villager trading. So why don't we make a deal that every time I do a trade with a villager, I will show it on camera. The reason I believe this could be balanced is, first of all, you can already trade with villagers infinitely, you just have to wait. And second of all, if you're wondering like, oh, well, you could just cheat and do things off camera and then we'd have no way of knowing. Well, I mean, the same thing applies with basically everything else in this game. Like, I could just hit this open to land button, turn on cheats, spawn in a bunch of items, and you guys would really have no way of knowing. I know that you guys are putting your trust in me to run a clean, legitimate hardcore world, and that is of course exactly what I'm doing. So all I'd be asking is for you to extend that trust to villager trading. So with that very long spiel out of the way, please let me know what you guys think. I really do want to hear all your thoughts down in the comments. Anyways, guys, that was a crazy amount of discussion. If you're still here sticking around listening to me ramble on, thank you very much, and I appreciate you a whole lot. But let's get into the episode. The first thing I want to do with you guys today is to tackle this boy. The big shroom, oh, you can barely see my face, big shroom that we put together in the end of the last episode. If you remember, in the end of the last episode, I wanted to turn this massive open area we have at the top of our mushroom and turn it into our main storage system. We're gonna have a whole bunch of chests up here and like an automated filter system and stuff, maybe even chest and shulker box unloaders for when we get our hands on those. So let's get right into that. Feels really good to have this upper area of the mushroom cleaned up and looking pretty good, if I do say so myself. I really love how it's very dim around the sides and the top. It really makes the floor we're walking on feel that much more illuminated. And of course, the block palette of the dirt, jungle planks, strip jungle log, and the mushroom block look really well together. On the low side of our mushroom here, I've already gone ahead and put down a whole bunch of chests. This is going to be for our main bulk storage. Here's the thing about storage systems. Basically all like, you know, the big fancy Minecraft YouTubers and content creators and Let's Players and all that, they have these huge fancy storage systems and they don't really explain how they work. Which is, in my opinion, a shame, because these storage systems, like the automatic filtering ones and stuff, are honestly some of the coolest redstone builds you can probably put together in Minecraft, and they're really not that difficult, even if they seem incredibly unintuitive. So I'm gonna do my best to explain how these things work. Obviously, first step is to put down your storage. That's just a given. You have to have some place to put the items. You don't have to make them in these 3x3 pockets, of course. I just kind of like having them. And the idea here is that each one of these columns here is gonna hold a separate item. Next, you're gonna wanna take your hoppers, and I've made a whole bunch of hoppers. I'm actually gonna need more because we will need a lot of hoppers. And then behind each one of these chests, you're gonna put a hopper. Make sure it's pointing into the chest. Now, of course, I definitely don't have enough hoppers in my inventory to do all of these, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do these 3 for now. And then behind the hoppers, we're gonna have a funky little redstone setup, and this is actually the most important key to the entire sorting system. First of all, I wanna mention that this design we're about to make is tileable, which means that all the redstone you need for sorting these 3 chests right here is just gonna fit in this one line. I know you always see these like giant webs of redstone and stuff behind the sorting system. duplication. It's actually just the same thing duplicated over and over again for each one of these like slices is what they're called. So first thing you're going to want to do is starting from the topmost hopper here, go 1, 2, 3, put a temporary block, and then 1, 2, 3. You can go ahead and break that. And now you can see we got like a little wheel here and then 2 blocks sticking out to the right from the topmost deep slate or whatever placeholder block you want here. It doesn't have to be deep slate going into that hopper. You're going to want to throw a redstone torch here just next to this middle hopper, a redstone repeater in the middle section there, once again pointing towards the chests. Then you're going to want to scoot on top here and do 1, 2, 3 redstone and a comparator facing out towards the redstone. Now you're going to take one last hopper here, and this is the most important part. You have to make sure that this hopper, when you place it down, it's facing the repeater. You do not want it to point down into the other hopper. This right here is incorrect. This hopper has to point sideways into this comparator. Then inside this hopper, you can take a filter item, basically any sort of item that you know is not going to stack with other items. So I've taken flint here, which of course I'm not sorting, and then I've also named it something, so it's not going to stack with other flint. You're going to do 4, just like that. And then you want to take the block that you are going to sort. In this case, I'm going to be sorting cobble deep slate, and you're going to want to take exactly 41 of these items, and you're going to slap it right in there. You will notice that the comparator has lit up. Redstone is being powered, but it's not reaching far enough to this repeater. There is not enough items in this hopper to power this comparator enough to make that redstone reach all the way. You can see if I open up F3, you can see this right here has power 2, this has power 1, that one right there though has power 0. And what that repeater does is it then turns off this torch. So I know that was kind of a lot, but let me explain the entire thing from top to bottom. Let's say I have, I don't know, a little bit more cobble deep slate being thrown in here, right? So what happens is the minute I throw in one more item, we're going to make that 42 cobble deep slate. This comparator is going to sense that there is just enough items for it to power 3 redstones. The minute I put in that deep slate, the comparator is going to go up by a notch. It's going to be a little bit more powerful. It's going to end up powering that redstone, which powers the repeater, which then turns off this torch. And what this torch does, even though it looks like it's not doing anything, it's actually locking this hopper. Very important thing to remember in the sorting system is that when you power a hopper with redstone, it stops like moving items through it. So stepping back for a minute and putting all of this to the test, you can see when I throw in a deep slate, this redstone is powered. Oh, you saw it just turned off there. If I put in the rest of the deep slate, you can watch. It's going to filter these out, or rather it's going to push those through like normal. But the minute we get to 41, aha, it stops. That's where the magic is, folks. It will sort all those items down to 41 blocks, and then it'll lock up. The remaining deep slate is down here in the bottom chest. And like I said before, the very best thing about this entire setup is this little bit behind me, this little gizmo, can be duplicated. So I'm gonna go take care of that right now, and then we'll talk about the next step, automatic sorting, when that's all taken care of. Okay, all the redstone and the filters and stuff have been completely set up. If you're wondering why there's only 5 storage areas instead of 6, well, I unfortunately can't fit one back here. Whoopsie. So what happens when you try and cram a rectangular storage system into a round build? Some things just don't fit quite right. Anyway, so this is cool and all, right? Like the automatic filters and whatnot, but in its current form, there really isn't much benefit to having this because as you saw, I still had to manually walk up here and poke around in the hoppers just to put the items in. At that point, I might as well just like use the actual chest at the bottom, you know, like there isn't much benefit to having this. But this is where part 2 of the storage system comes in. It's going to be really, really cool. We're going to be using water to basically have all the items flow across the top, and they'll automatically get sucked up by the hoppers if they match the filter item beneath them. I'm going to go ahead and do a cut here, get all of that built up, and then we'll talk about it. Wow, there's weird stuff on the top. So you might be thinking, what on earth did you do to that storage system? You got like a bunch of glass, you got a bunch of ice, you got a bunch of floating chests behind me, seemingly doing absolutely nothing. Let me break it down for you. So I built up this whole kind of contraption on top of the main sorting unit, and this is what actually goes and automatically distributes all the items into the right chest for us. Starting over here, we've got a little bit of a bubble elevator, and this is where I can throw in some items. And you'll see that they go up and they get pushed throughout this entire system system. And what you're actually looking at here is two separate streams of water that are designed to loop the items around back and forth. The reason we need a loop is because, well, if you look at any of these filters, you can see that, let's say I'm throwing in cobble, right? It can only fit, what, like 23 cobblestone at a time before the rest of it just keeps on moving. And that's a bit of a problem because, I mean, like I said, this is our bulk storage. I mean, look at my inventory. We're going to be throwing in stacks and stacks of just random crap here. So we need a way to be able to pick up the items over and over again until there's nothing left. And that's exactly what happens here. The items go up, they move across this way, and it moves across this lower track here, which has the ice and the hoppers all the way down to the other end. Now, one very, very important thing that a lot of people do neglect is that chest right there. That chest is not actually there to hold any items. Believe it or not, that chest is there because of its physical size. As you probably know, chests are a little bit smaller than a full block, not only in their height, but also in their width and their length. What that means is if an item hits against the chest, it balances right on the edge of that ice block right there. You can see there's a tiny little 1 pixel gap. It skirts along the edges of the hoppers and doesn't fall into like that little hole where the hoppers are, right? They don't fall into the middle of the hoppers. So let's say we threw in a whole stack of cobble, right? The cobble filter will pick up, what, 23? The rest are going to keep on trucking along down here. It goes under here. The blue ice helps it continue moving even though there's no water in that gap. And from this point on, it hits this wall here, so it's no longer hanging over. You'll see that we have half slabs all along here. If any of these were a full block, the item would just stop because it would actually hit up against the very corner of that full block. Loops around here, it goes into the bubble vader, goes up, and then moves all the way back down this other pathway. I know the water is barely visible, going in the opposite direction all the way down over here, and it gets deposited right at the beginning of our sorting system, and it does the entire thing again. So I've done a couple test runs of this thing, and it does definitely work, but I want to show you how it actually looks when I've got all this junk in my inventory flowing through the system. It's really cool looking, and I want to incorporate it into the build in some way. Of course, we're going to be decorating this entire thing, but I do definitely want to keep a little bit of the glass visible because watching the items flow through is really neat. Alright, yeah, that's like a whole inventory's worth of different stuff right there, and look how cool it is. I love watching the little dudes fly through. It's actually so cool. One of the things I always wish Minecraft improved upon was the amount of motion you can add into your builds. You got pistons and campfires, which add a little bit of motion into your builds, but like, it can be hard to work with those, and there's still pretty limited options. Water elevators and water streams moving items around, I think, is a really fantastic way of just making your build seem that much more alive and moving and dynamic. You know, it's really neat. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna let this continue sorting as I begin the decorative process for all this stuff behind me, including the mysterious floating chests that I have just not acknowledged at all this entire time. You'll see exactly what they're for. They're gonna be pretty dang cool. You guys already know what time it is. It's time-lapse time, baby. Man, I love foliage. You might have noticed during the time-lapse, and I'm sure you're noticing right now, that sprinkled in amongst all the moss and azalea here is a little bit of green concrete powder. And if you're up to date with your survival Minecraft, then you would know that the only way to legitimately obtain green concrete powder is by finding cactus. And let me tell you, the process of acquiring some cactus for this build was, well, to put it kindly, an adventure. I genuinely think that what I did in order to get this green dye for this green concrete powder was one of the most cursed things that has ever happened to me in Minecraft. Let me tell you about it. So I wanted green concrete powder for a little bit of texture variety in this build, and I didn't have any cactus, which means I needed to go on an adventure to find a desert. So I left my base, set off for the wide world beyond, stopped in a quick sunflower plains because I realized I didn't actually have any sunflowers, And then I approached the mangrove swamp that I've been going to previously because I knew that there is a savanna biome nearby, and I figured if there is a savanna nearby, there might have been a desert as well that I just never saw. So there I was, trudging on through the mangrove swamp, getting incredibly laggy frames. I'm telling you, these mangrove swamps are not good for my computer. I actually had to turn down my render distance a little bit just to make it through, but oh my god, going through a mangrove swamp at night, in the rain, with mobs attacking you constantly, is really terrifying. And I kind of knew what I was getting into, but nothing can really prepare you for just the laggy late night mangrove experience. It's terrible. At the very least though, I got to see some cool frogs. I eventually just said screw it and took a left turn, made my way out of the mangrove swamp. Eventually I found the coastline where I was able to see this ridiculous looking bamboo forest off to my right. I didn't go investigate unfortunately, but oh my god, look at all that bamboo. I sailed and sailed and sailed for a long time. The minutes kept going and going, and eventually I just gave up and checked the seed and looked at the seed finder. Believe it or not, by some bizarre coincidence, the exact spot that I paused in my boat in like the middle of the ocean, in the middle of nowhere, was exactly like on the same X and Z coordinates, like down to the block. What are the odds? So I checked the seed finder like a little noob, and lo and behold, right on the other side of that mangrove swamp was, well, a whole desert. So I turned myself around and back I went. Really getting tired of boating at this point, but you gotta keep going. As I'm sailing by the mangrove swamp, I noticed that like I'm getting these really weird frame drops. Like every time I hit, I think, a chunk boundary, or even just multiple times in a chunk, I would just get these insane lag spikes go down to like 0 frames per minute. I check my FPS here, I check my task manager and stuff. I don't know what in the world is going on, but it's really difficult, and it is getting worse. And worst of all, I haven't found any cactus yet, but I just have to keep on trekking. You know, I've made it this far, I've been out for this long. I cannot stop until I get my hands on the cactus, even though my game is lagging out like crazy. Legitimately the most frustrating thing I have done in a while, trying to navigate this insanely laggy ass biome. Like, there is no reason my computer should have been this laggy. I get a little bit of frame drops from the mangrove swamp, but this is nuts. It legit feels like my computer's fans are whirring. It legit feels like it's about to burst into flames. Like, just look at this. Like, can you play this? Because I certainly can't. Anyways, I eventually reached the desert. I see what I think is a desert village up ahead, but it's actually a desert temple, which is pretty neat. I check the loot, I get an enchanted golden apple, which is kinda nuts. Although admittedly, I was mainly looking for diamonds here because with our new challenge, we cannot mine diamonds. So every structure I find, I'm really trying to get diamonds, like even more than usual, because that is my only way of getting raw diamonds. Grab a few bits more cactus, and I'm finally on my way back home. After a lot of render distance changes and restarting the game a couple times, I finally make it back. I can see my big shroom off in the distance, and I'm home at last. Oh boy. But regardless, we have the green concrete powder now, and it looks really nice in our build. I played around with a couple different arrangements for this storage system. You might remember that all of the chests over here were definitely in like a different position and stuff, and there were definitely less of them before I went to the time lapse. I just couldn't make that layout work, unfortunately, but I do really like what we've got now. I definitely feel kind of short when I'm reaching for the top chests up here, but well, that's just part of the look. It's all good. And much like the storage system in our little starter tree, which we'll definitely still be using for probably like miscellaneous storage and maybe some smelting and whatever, I've got this really cool little moss foliage cover. I definitely put a lot more thought into it this time around with, like I was just talking about, the green concrete powder and the azalea leaves and the grass and everything, and I might even continue it so it goes a little bit further up. Might want to do something about that in the future. I'm still working out the details, but overall I think this turned out super well. And of course, like I was talking about, you can just kind of barely see little tiny snippets of the actual sorting system up there. Getting a little bit of a peek behind the moss, looking up at the glass over there. Oh, by the way, I've been a little bit busy off camera. If we just go ahead and MLG scaffolding our way down here and go take a peek down in our starter tree, down in our basement, you will see that I have been hollowing out a large area where our enchanting table used to be. This is getting somewhere. I definitely still have a lot of digging to go, but it's a start. I did say at the beginning of the video we would be getting back to this little spot under here, putting something in this area. I'm thinking that this site right here is eventually going to be filled by an entire moss farm. And if you're wondering why specifically a moss farm, what are you doing? What is happening? When I'm not recording, I actually spend most of my time over here at the lump. Well, maybe not most, but it's still a much larger percentage than you would think that I do. And really, the only thing I'm doing here is just getting bone meal. I've had to farm so many mushroom blocks, I've had to make a lot of jack-o'-lanterns, I've had to get a lot of dark oak wood, had to get a lot of beetroots and wheat to make things like packed mud and a red dye and stuff like that. All of that requires a lot of bone meal. And as we progress further into Minecraft, building bigger and bigger things, working on a larger and larger scale, this manual way of getting bone meal is just not gonna cut it. So I figured we should take the time and invest in a moss farm which will be producing tons and tons of bone meal for us constantly. Well, hello there. I got it! Yo, what are the odds? Well, actually, the odds are pretty high because I have loading 3 on my sword, but what are the odds? I'm gonna go and get that moss farm all taken care of. I might do a couple little progress updates along the way. I'm not entirely sure yet. Let's finish off today's episode with a bone meal moss farm. Yep, I think it's working. Forgive the tight quarters here, there's definitely not too much overhead. As you saw, I had to even actually dig out a little bit of extra space back there to please get the moss out of my inventory. There we go. Dig out a little bit of extra space over there just to be able to fit all the redstone in. But oh man, this farm is fantastic. Real quick, I gotta give credit to Cebaloo622. They came up with this moss farm design. It is a really fantastic moss farm design, and they have an equally fantastic build tutorial over on their YouTube channel. As for the inner workings of this thing, it's definitely a lot simpler than other moss farms I've made in the past. I'm not going to try and explain the inner workings of exactly how all this stuff works, A, because I don't particularly understand it, but also, if you want to know more, just go check out Cebaloo's video. It's really great, trust me. So yeah, I've been running this thing just kind of on and off for a little while, making sure it's working. I haven't done like a big AFK session or whatnot yet, but you can see we are collecting some bone meal down here. Wow, that's actually a lot more than I thought was going to be there. And we've got a little bit up here that's going up into the dispenser that's going to go back into the farm. I don't know the exact rates of like how many bone meal per hour you get from this thing. Like I said, it's a pretty small farm. It's not like super mega ultra powered or whatever, but honestly, if you need that much more bone meal, you can just go ahead and build a second farm. This was really easy to put together. And actually, now that I mention it, I do have a little bit of extra space over here from when I was originally digging out the area. It wouldn't be that hard to just build another one. I'll be right back. I built another one. So yeah, now we got 2 of these bad boys pumping out bone meal, and the cool thing about this farm is that if I flip this lever or this lever, I will also be getting moss in addition to bone meal. I know this is a huge mess right now. I've kind of just dug out a very ugly hole underneath my starter tree, but I'm gonna get it all patched up, but that's gonna have to wait till a future episode, unfortunately, because we are almost out of video time for today. But before you go anywhere, just keep in mind that in our next episode, episode 6, oh, I just realized I had the mini hut on this whole time. Whoops. Some things you just don't see. I don't know. This thing right here is a little client-side mod that allows me to look at light levels. You've probably seen it before. A lot of other YouTubers use it. You can see very easily if any blocks are spawnable. But yeah, okay. Well, I've toggled that off now. What was I talking about? Oh, yes, episode 6. It's been long enough. We've been putting off kind of, finishing this game. Making some ice vendor, finding a stronghold, fighting the ender dragon, that kind of thing. I think it's about time we get on that. Considering we're now unable to mine diamonds, I think end cities are going to be a really, really great source of loot, enchanted diamond gear. It'll be a really, really great thing to have. So keep an eye out for that episode coming soon. It's going to be a stressful one because, oh boy, I've never fought the ender dragon before in hardcore, but we'll see how that goes. And with that being said, I think we are just about out of video time for today. If you enjoyed, please don't forget to leave a like on the video. It really helps me out in the fancy schmancy YouTube algorithm or whatever is going on these days. Also, don't forget to comment down below what you think about my whole stance on the villager stuff. I would really like to be able to use those guys in some capacity or another, but I don't want to do anything that you guys would consider cheaty. Until next time, my dudes, this has been Leon, and I will see you all in the next Minecraft Random Hardcore video. Take care, my dudes.